اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين صلى الله وسلم عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله وسلم عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين يقولون ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. صدق الله العلي العظيم وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. In a number of verses, the Holy Quran describes in very interesting ways the human life cycle and what happens in terms of growth and decay, physically, biologically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. One of the more prominent verses is in chapter number 30. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahu alladhi khalaqakum min dha'f ثم جعل من بعد ضعف قوة ثم جعل من بعد قوة ضعفا وشيبة يخلق ما يشاء وهو العليم القدير. How were we created? The Quran says that initially when we were created out of weakness. And commentators have said that this refers to the weakness of a child, a baby. That a baby is dependent upon his or her environment, the parents, to take care of it in every single aspect. Not a single aspect other than what the body does automatically, such as breathing and sleeping and the other internal functions, can the baby take care of itself. So when it comes to feeding, when it comes to being bathed and clothed, that is weakness, since it does not have power and authority over itself. And then the second stage, if you were to divide it in 3 stages, obviously after weakness comes strength. ثم جعل من بعد ضعف قوة. Mankind becomes capable, able to take care of himself or herself, becomes independent, detaches himself or herself from their parents. And then after strength, they begin to wane one more time back into weakness. Almost like a childlike weakness. And so every one of these cycles, every one of these stages in life is significant. And it shows us how neither weakness is temporary within us, neither weakness is permanent, so it is temporary, nor is strength permanent. When you feel like you have authority, when you feel like you have independence, when you feel like you have control physically, that doesn't last until the rest of your life. Eventually, there are some faculties, bodily faculties, that stop functioning. And through that, you are brought back to a stage of weakness, showing that all true and permanent strength belongs only to the Creator, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, a few nights ago we spoke about what it means to be a parent. And what I spoke about was, number one, we need to realize our own paradigm and our habits and where we come from and self-awareness. Because whatever we project in terms of teaching, in terms of coaching, in terms of tarbiyah, upbringing, is a result of habit. It's a result of behavior that more or less has been passed down to us from our parents and passed down from our grandparents and our great-grandparents. When it comes to sometimes disciplinary methods or disciplinary attitudes, it's something which is normally passed down. When it comes to, for instance, God forbid, certain tendencies like alcoholism, alcohol abuse or misuse, it can become so permeated that it becomes hereditary, it becomes genetic, and it's passed down from one generation to another. And so it takes someone who is a transition person with a lot of courage, with great courage and great strength, to be able to draw the line in the sand and say that this type of behavior stops with me. The Quran also emphasizes the very early years, from before a child is born, the stages of conception as the child develops in the womb of the mother, and then when the child is born and emerges into childhood and adolescence. And those are, psychologists tell us that those are very, very significant years. They're important years. Because it's during that time that a child begins to learn very critical life skills, and they adopt certain traits and a certain view that carries on with them for the rest of their life. For instance, children at that age begin to learn trust, and trust is the glue that holds relationships together. Now, trust is not just being able to trust someone, but also being a trustworthy person. That if someone keeps something safe with you, such as a secret, that it is to be trusted. All of this comes through observation. And the primary influencers in a family are who? The parents. The parents, biologically, they create the child, but your right towards your children is not just a biological right. There is indeed a haqq, a right, that the parent owes the child in the same way that the child owes the parent. And the great example of that, how we learn about huquq, one of the great documents on that is Risalat al-Huquq lil-Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, our fourth Imam, in which he describes what is the right of a parent upon a child, a mother, a father, a teacher, a brother. So there are different rights. And the child begins to observe, they begin to learn how to be a friend. They begin to learn self-esteem. They begin to learn how to share. They begin to learn creative imagination. All of these are very critical components in the life of a human being that remain with a human being for the rest of their life. But they are created, they are molded, and they are fashioned during those early years. So, the attitude of a child when they look at their parents is also the attitude of, you're the grown-up. You're the grown-up. You need to know. I don't need to know. You need to know. And so that's why child psychologists, they suggest that as rebellious as children can be, now whether they're young children or mid-aged children or adolescents, as rebellious that they can be, at the same time, because they see that the world around them can be chaotic, especially later in the years, during their youth years and their adolescent years, it's because of that fact that even though they act rebellious, they still expect standards from their parents. And a lot of parents, they see their children's rebellious attitude, the way that they interpret it is that my child simply does not want to follow the rules. And that's not necessarily true. Even if a child exhibits that they do not want to follow the rules, in reality, they need standards. They need guidelines. It's during those very early ages you find from age around 3 to 6 years old, during the preschool, kindergarten, first grade, that you see that children also become very creative in their imagination. The way that they interpret and they imagine or the way that they sometimes misinterpret certain things. The behaviors that they're taught. There was an article that came out more than a decade ago, and it was discussing the case. Maybe some of you are familiar with this, but it was discussing the case of a young girl who lived in a city in the Ukraine. And her parents were, poor, and they could not provide fully for her. So there were more people in the house than there was room for people to sleep. So at around the age of 3 years old, she went outside to sleep with the dogs in the kennel. And she spent years in that state. So the documentary that they did on her, or the piece in the documentary, showed her behavior. And she was acting exactly like a dog. She would bark at the people who were filming her. The way that she would, stick her tongue out and pant, the way, and breathe the way that a dog does. She was obviously on all fours, trying to run on the palms of her hands and her knees. When she'd get close to a water, a faucet, the way that a dog washes itself and sort of rinses itself off, she would do the same thing. And they had found her in this state. She had slept around the dogs. She even ate with them, the way that she carried a bone in her mouth. And even though many years later, and many years of treatment and psychoanalysts later, she had completely changed and she had become a normal human being, a functioning human being. She was saying that she can turn to that dog-like state whenever she wanted, because it's something that happened so early on in her life. So it made an imprint. So there are 3 areas that I want to discuss when it comes to helping your children guiding your children from that stage of what the Quran calls weakness, ضعف, all the way to quwwah, to strength. One of the most important areas is the area of understanding and managing fear. Now, psychologists state that there are 2 fears that we are inherently born with. The first is a fear of heights, and the second is a fear of loud noises. That's why you see sometimes if you turn on a vacuum around a baby, or you shut a door, or do something as small as crunch a bottle, they turn around. They're agitated or they're surprised. But even though those are fears that children learn or children are born with, they can unlearn them. Obviously, people don't remain afraid of heights for the rest of their life. Some people do, but not everyone. And the fear of loud noises also goes away. Every other fear, psychologists say, is learned. So when you talk about the 6 fears, there are 6 fears that Napoleon Hill talks about. The fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and death. These are the 6 most prominent fears. If you think about it, babies are not born with that. I mean, what baby is afraid of poverty? There's no understanding of wealth and poverty. Or the fear of loss of love of someone. That's not a fear that develops until later, a few years later. So there are some fears that are acquired, such as what? Fear of criticism. When people say they are afraid of public speaking, they say some people claim that it's the number 1 fear in the world, the fear of public speaking. Well, it goes away. It's something that goes away. That fear goes away with practice. Fear, some people say, is an acronym for false evidence appearing real. So if somebody fears something that you do not fear, what's the tendency, if you're able to walk them through? When someone fears something that you don't fear, what do you tell them? You tell them, don't fear. But the reality is that they fear it. In the same way that there are some things that you fear. Imagine someone says, well, just don't fear that. Don't worry about that. And sometimes when we say don't worry is one of the most ineffective phrases that we can say to someone. Because worry and fear can manifest itself in a very physical way, in a physiological way. There are some fears we know that are rational and some fears that are irrational. Irrational fears are the ones that are called phobia. So anytime you see a phobia, that's an irrational fear. Such as what? When people say Islamophobia, it's an irrational fear. And fear is also based in ignorance. So when people say Islamophobia, or some people, they have claustrophobia, fear of tight spaces. Or some people have fear of, they call it arachnophobia, which is the fear of spiders. There's a phobia, I'm forgetting the name now, but it's when people are afraid of clowns. That's a phobia. There's even a phobia, if you look in the dictionary. I'm not kidding, this is real, you can look it up. It's the fear of having peanut butter stick to the roof of your mouth. There's a name for that, there's a specific name for that. And if you've ever had it, if you've ever had that happen, it could be a very fearful, it's a frightening experience, thinking that you're going to choke and die, lack of oxygen. So these are phobias, these are all irrational fears, but sometimes there are rational fears, such as the fear of death, such as the fear of poverty, such as the fear of old age. But even fears that are rational, they can be remedied. This is why you see people who have lived that they do not fear old age. They embrace old age. Or they're not afraid of death. There are courageous people that live in this world that they do not fear death. They know that it's a reality. They know that it's coming. When it comes to your children, though, how do you walk them through? So I'll give you an example. This was an example that I read earlier. So what does it look like to acknowledge someone's fear and then walk them through it? So if a child, for instance, is afraid of a barking dog, do you tell them not to worry? Or you tell them it's okay that you worry, but I'm here with you? And by the way, this is not just walking a child through their fears. Sometimes you can walk through these practices, you're able to walk an adult through their fears as well, because sometimes there are adults that are afraid of dogs, for instance, that a dog is going to come out and bite them. It's okay to tell them that it's okay to fear. Sometimes it's okay as a parent to show your children that when I was your age, I also used to fear certain things. What psychologists say is that sometimes children during those early ages, they can't tell the difference between the function of a human body and a machine or an inanimate object. So when they see, for instance, a vacuum cleaner, they think that it has the power to gobble them up and swallow them. Or if they see an action figure or a doll miss its arm and it becomes dislocated, they think the same thing can come with them, can happen to them. And this is something that they truly fear, even though as an adult you may think that it is irrational. I'll give you a personal example. When I was younger, one of the fears that I had, for a number of years my family lived in London, the United Kingdom. So if you've been there, here the public mailboxes, if you've seen, they're the blue ones, the blue public mailbox that you open the lid, you throw the letter in and you close. Over there it's much taller, it's about this tall. And it's red, and it has a mouth that opens. And my fear as a child was that at nighttime, when everybody goes to sleep, these things, they start roaming the streets, and they can swallow people up. Because it had a mouth, and it was much bigger than me in height. Now you're thinking now that this is an irrational fear, but for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, it was a rational fear. But there's ways to help people move beyond those fears. The second is when it comes to helping your children navigate through what's going on TV and the media. Now, TV has obviously changed over the past 10, 15, 20 years. But one thing that has been consistent, if you look over the past 10, 15, 20, 30 years, is violence. Violence on TV. It's very prevalent. And sometimes when children watch TV and they see violence, they can think that it's very normal for someone to behave in a very violent manner. There was a study that was conducted in Stanford University a number of years ago by a professor of psychology. And it was called the Bandura's Bobo doll experiment. Now, a Bobo doll, if you don't know what it is one of those dolls that if you hit it, it comes back. It's filled with air, and if you hit it, it comes back, sort of like a punching bag. It was a series of experiments that were conducted, and basically what they would do is that they would take a child who was around the age of 4 or 5, and they would have him or her observe the way that adults treated this doll. So they had an adult, and there's a video of it that you can watch. It's picking up this doll, throwing it up in the air, smacking it left, smacking it right, throwing it on the floor, kicking it, being violent with it. And then they would place the child in the room with the doll. And you can guess how the child would react, how the child would behave, in the exact same way that the parent behaved. They also conducted, in terms of that experiment, where another group of children would sit and they would witness a parent or an adult figure behave very peacefully with the doll and not punch it and not kick it. What do you expect happened? The same behavior. It was mimicked. Everything that they saw from their parents, they took it into their conscious. So violence is one thing. Another thing with TV, why most people have stopped watching TV, is advertisements. But no matter where you go, the advertisements are going to get you. And they make you pay up if you don't want to watch advertisements anymore. And if you haven't seen a advertisement on children's TV in a long time, I recommend you go back, because every year they get better and better with the way that they sell to children. You know, a 30-second commercial or a 20-second commercial, everything's quick, flashing lights, everything's perfect. And then they throw the price at you. It's important to explain to children when they're watching TV what an advertisement is and the purpose behind an advertisement. That it's a means to get you to buy, and not just buy, but you buy right now. And alhamdulillah, with the blessings of everything on demand and Amazon Prime and Amazon same-day delivery, it becomes possible for everyone to get what they want. There was another study that was conducted at Stanford University many years ago. Some of you are probably familiar with this. It was called the Marshmallow Test. And basically what the Marshmallow Test was, they took a group of 5 and 6-year-olds, they placed them in a room, and the person conducting the experiment would sit across the table from them, and there was a marshmallow in front of them. And they were told, this person that was sitting the adult that was sitting across the table, they'd say that I'm going to leave the room, and I'm going to come back 15, 20 minutes later, a while later. If that marshmallow is still there, and you haven't touched it, and you've resisted, you get rewarded with a second one. And if it's not there, then nothing. You've already enjoyed the one that we put in front of you. So they would leave the room. Now about half of them would eat it right away. There was a way that they were able to witness all of this. About half of them would eat it right away, and another half would wait. They were patient. So they'd get rewarded with a second one. Now the interesting part is that they tracked these children for many decades later. And when they tracked them down as adults, and they recorded their habits, and they recorded their behaviors and their reactions, they found the ones that were patient. They found the ones that delayed their gratification. They found the ones that resisted their temptation in any which way possible. They did better in life in many different areas. When it came to their relationships, they did better in life. They made better choices. They made better health choices. When it came to mental illnesses, when it came to, for instance, anxiety, they had less percentage of anxiety because they had restraint. Because it wasn't about what I can get right now. And the challenge with advertisements is that it's about what I can get right now, at this moment. Think about it. How many times have you seen an advertisement? And sometimes it's an advertisement for something that you haven't even thought of. you didn't even think about before. But you saw the commercial, and not only did you learn about this thing that it exists, but you told yourself in your mind that I need it right now. I need to get it right now. So in the short term, you may get what you want, but in the long term, that creates damage. So it boils down to monitoring what is seen on TV. And today it's not just TV, but it's iPads and iPhones and social media. Because that becomes their door to the world. And the Quran tells us that that age group, what they see, it remains with them for the rest of their life. What they witness remains with them for the rest of their life. It says, as an example in chapter 24, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, liyasta'dhinukum alladhina malakat aymanukum, walladhina lam yablughu al-hulma minkum thalatha marrat. So, O you who believe, those people that are working in your home, and the children that you have that are under the age of puberty. So it's talking about childhood, early childhood. If they are to enter your private quarters, your private room, let them ask permission during 3 times. The first time, and this is chapter 24, verse 58. Let them ask for your permission 3 times. Min qabli salat al-fajr, before the fajr time, when you're still asleep. The second, وَحِينَ تَضَعُونَ ثِيَابَكُم مِّنَ الظَّهِيرَةِ. So during the midday when you come back home and you remove your outer layer of clothing. And the third, وَمِن بَعْدِ صَلَاةِ الْعِشَاءِ, after the Isha prayer. ثَلَاثُ عَوْرَاتٍ لَكُمْ. These 3 times, the Quran says, an awra is what? An awra is something that is private, a private part. These 3 times are private for you, so that they don't witness what they should not witness. It's a time of privacy between the husband and wife. Out of that, if you look at the world of psychology, it's because of that psychologists such as Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung came up with the idea of the Oedipus Complex and the Electra Complex. How children, when it comes to their desire and vying for the attention of their parents and jealousy towards their parents, it comes from the private things that they witness at a young age that they should not witness. Now, it's a pretty bizarre theory that they've come up with, but there is a basis to it, that children see certain things, and then the young girl starts to get jealous of her mother because she wants her father's attention and her father's time, and the opposite. The young boy becomes jealous of his father and resentful because he wants his mother's attention and mother's time, because they see certain things that are private, so they come to certain realizations. The basis of that is true, though, that what they witness at a young age, so when it comes to your words, whether you choose to use profanity in front of your children or not. Some people choose to use profanity in front of their children with the idea that they don't speak, they don't even talk yet. They understand and they listen even before they are born, when they are in their mother's womb. There was a experiment that was conducted one time where they had children, babies that were in their mother's womb. They would play a certain song for them. When the child was born, even at those early stages, the infant stage, they would attach, and I don't know exactly how they did this, but they would attach a feeding bottle with milk, and the more the child would pull from the bottle, the more it would play a certain song. And they found that the song that was played, that the baby was familiar with in his or her mother's womb, was the one that they were more attracted to. So they would drink more out of the bottle to hear the song, even though the baby was in the womb of the mother. So it starts even before that. So exposure, my friends, is important. Sometimes I've been to some households where the TV is on 24 hours a day, never turns off. There's always white noise in the background. There's always commercials in the background or nonsense in the background. Knowing when to turn off the TV, if you've watched it, knowing when to turn it off. So this is one area. One area was the area of managing fear. One is television and what we see. And what some psychologists say is, look, when it comes to giving your children technology, there are two ground rules that everyone should follow. Number one is delay it as much as possible. Children are going to ask to have devices by age 2 or 3. Delay it as much as possible. This is number one. And number two, a rule that really helps in the household, and I've seen people implement this and it works, is no social media and no phones at night, not in your bedroom. There's nothing that's important that needs to ping you and wake you up in the middle of the night if you're 12 and 13 years old. Nothing at all. There's no emergency that requires your attention at that age. So the third is the area of possession and giving. This is very important, my friends. Learning how to give and what to give. The Quran says the following: وَلَا تَجْعَلْ يَدَكَ مَغْلُولَةً إِلَىٰ عُنُقِكَ وَلَا تَبْسُطْهَا كُلَّ الْبَسْطِ فَتَقْعُدَ مَلُومًا مَحْسُورًا. A very vivid description. And this is a general direction that says, don't place your hand clamped to your neck. What does that mean? That's a sign of greediness. Have you seen children when they're holding a toy or they're holding a food item or they're holding something and you try to take it away from them? Where do they put it? They put it to their chest. It's instinctual for them to put it to their chest, to their neck. The Quran says, وَلَا تَجْعَلْ يَدَكَ مَغْلُولَةً إِلَىٰ عُنُقِكَ. So when you give. Don't be the type of person who always has their hand up to their neck, up to their chest when someone asks you to give, when someone asks you to contribute, when someone asks you to donate. Also, وَلَا تَبْسُطْهَا كُلَّ الْبَسْطِ فَتَقْعُدَ مَلُومًا مَحْسُورًا. Do not extend it completely, meaning do not give away everything that you have. Some people, they're irresponsibly generous. Generosity is to be in moderation. So some people are irresponsibly generous. They give away every single thing that they have. And things that maybe they don't have, that belongs to other people. وَلَا تَبْسُطْهَا كُلَّ الْبَسْطِ فَتَقْعُدَ مَلُومًا مَحْسُورًا. If you give away everything and you find yourself in a state of poverty, the Quran says then you have no one to blame except for yourself. And sometimes when it comes to our children, we need them to learn a sense of possession, meaning to own, before they can give, before they can share. Because the mantra that we teach our children about sharing is what? What do we tell our kids about sharing? What's the phrase that everybody uses? Sharing is caring, which is true. But sometimes a child needs to learn how to possess and own before they can share and before they can give. I'll give you an example. Stephen Covey talks about this. He says that one day I came home, the author. He says, and it was my daughter's 3rd birthday. And I saw her standing in the corner. And she had all of her toys to herself. And there were all these kids and they had their hands outstretched. They wanted to share in the toys. But she had it to herself. She didn't want to share. So he said, I came to her. He said, and I asked her, I said, sweetie, why don't you share your toys with the children? She said, no. So he said, I began to reason with her. I said, it's good. Sharing is caring. If you share with people, people are going to share with you. This is reasoning. This is logic. She said, no, I don't want to share. He said, okay, now I have to change my tactic. He said, then I started to bribe her. I told her, if you do share, I have a surprise for you. I'll give you a piece of gum. She said, no, I don't want a piece of gum. I want my toys. He said, then he got really embarrassed. He said, then I started to threaten her. I said, if you don't give your toys and if you don't share your toys, something really bad is going to happen. She said, no, I'm not going to share. So finally, he said, I was so embarrassed in front of the other parents, so I grabbed some of the toys and I just gave it to the child. And he said, I realized 2 things later on when I reflected. He said, what I did was wrong. Number 1, I cared more about what the other parents thought than my relationship with my daughter. Sometimes as parents, we care about how is this parent going to judge me when I speak to my child in a certain way. The behavior, we include someone else, triangulation, in our relationship with our own children, because of a fear of how somebody is going to judge us, that this person is not a good enough parent, or this person is not an effective parent. He said that should have been the last thing on my mind. The relationship between me and my daughter was more important about what other people thought about me and that embarrassment. And he said, number two, children need to learn possession before they can share, before they can give. There's a saying in Arabic, فَاقِدُ الشَّيْء لَا يُعْطِي. A person that doesn't have cannot give. So when they don't have a sense of ownership and when they don't have a sense of possession, they can never share. They can never give. And he says what tends to happen is that if it's not addressed properly at a young age, it carries with a person for the rest of their life. That because they don't have they don't own and they don't possess a true identity of themselves, they've never owned their own identity, they don't know how to give and take when it comes to a relationship. That's why their relationships are messed up. Because at a young age, they're never taught to share because they're never taught to own. Sometimes you need to own before you can share. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam was the greatest example of the person that was able to share and give and contribute. He gave everything that he had, everything that was dear to him, everything that was meaningful to him, everything that was significant to him, including his own children. And the way that Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam describes him, he says, وَبَذَلَ مُهْجَتَهُ فِيكَ لِيَسْتَنْقِذَ عِبَادَكَ مِنَ الْجَهَالَةِ وَحِيرَةِ الضَّلَالَةِ. That he gave up his muhja. Do you know what that is? Muhja is the blood that's in the heart. The blood of the heart is called muhja. When someone asks us to contribute, earlier today there was a blood drive. When someone asks you to contribute blood, you don't stick the needle in the heart. You stick it in the vein, in the arm. Even though it's all the same blood, it all gets circulated. But the heart of the blood is something which is very dear. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq describes him. He said he gave up the heart of his blood because on that day, blood was pouring out of his heart. It was pouring out of his chest when the arrows fell into his chest. Blood was coming from every part of his body when he was struck by the enemy. In order to get what? In order to save people from ignorance. In order to save people from going astray. That was the exchange. I'll give you the blood of my heart. In return, give these people guidance. What a heavy, heavy price he paid. And sometimes we don't realize the price that he paid. So we remain ignorant and we remain lost intentionally. When we can know, when we can be knowledgeable, when we can be enlightened. And so I just want to take a couple of minutes, brothers and sisters, to talk about donating and giving and contributing. You know, centers like these and majalis like these, it doesn't happen just out of thin air. Everything that's put here together is very intentional. And it would be very nice if we can build our centers by writing checks of salawat. But unfortunately, you cannot put salawat on a check. So, Imam Hussein alayhi salam gave everything that he had, everything that was most dear to him. And we're also asked for a contribution in exchange. We are also asked to share what is dear to us, what is valuable to us. And in reality, the least valuable thing to us is what? Money. It's the least valuable thing. The most valuable thing is time, but you still require that thing which is least valuable in order to support the majalis. So I'll ask you and I'll encourage you to give and look at the example of Imam Hussein alayhi salam that he gave for all of humanity. وَبَذَلَ مُهْجَتَهُ فِيكَ لِيَسْتَنْقِذَ عِبَادَكَ مِنَ الْجَهَالَةِ وَحِيرَةِ الضَّلَالَةِ. And one of the dearest people to the heart to Imam Hussein alayhi salam was his son Ali al-Akbar. A man who, according to the description of his own father, كان أشبه الناس خلقا وخلقا ومنطقا برسول الله. He was the most similar. There was such a striking resemblance when you would see his face of Rasulullah of his great-grandfather. One narration says that a Christian man had come to Medina during the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he entered the masjid of the Prophet. And people saw him and they said, what are you doing here inside the masjid of the Prophet? This is exclusive for the Muslim community. And so he told them that I have accepted Islam. And he described to them a dream that he had, that he saw Isa alayhi salam. And Isa alayhi salam told him, he pointed next to him, and in that dream was also the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And so Isa alayhi salam told him to accept. He said, this is the messenger after me. So he accepted Islam. But he came to Medina in order to repeat his shahada, his testimony of faith. So they pointed him to the home of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So he went to the home and he explained to the Imam his dream, and then he repeated his shahada. And since he had seen the Prophet in his dream, he knew what the Prophet looked like. The dream was still fresh in his mind, the appearance of the Prophet. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam says, do you want to see someone who has the most striking resemblance to the Prophet? Do you want to see the Prophet again? He says, yes. He brought to him his son Ali al-Akbar. He says, this is him. This is the one that when we long for the Prophet, we look at his face because he reminds us of the Prophet. In his physical appearance, in his character, in his demeanor, in the way that he walked, in the way that he spoke. Everything about him resembled the Prophet, was similar to the Prophet. And Ali al-Akbar was a man of great conviction. Narration says that on the way to Karbala, of course, Imam Hussein alayhi salam was struggling during those days. He knew that death was imminent and the end was imminent. So a narration says that Ali al-Akbar saw his father in that state, that he would sort of doze off. He would fall asleep and wake up, and he kept repeating, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So Ali al-Akbar turned to his father. He said, Father, what is it that is grieving you? What is it that is bothering you? He said to him, أَوَلَسْنَا عَلَى الْحَقِّ? Are we not on the path of truth? Imam Hussein said to him, بَلَا يَا بُنَيْ. Yes, surely we are on the path of truth. So Ali al-Akbar responds, إِذَنْ لَا نُبَالِي وَقَعَ الْمَوْتُ عَلَيْنَا أَمْ وَقَعْنَا عَلَى الْمَوْتِ. It doesn't make a difference then. If we know we're doing the right thing, it doesn't make a difference whether we fall upon death or death falls upon us. Doesn't make a difference. His mother was Layla bint Abi Murra al-Thaqafi, a noble lady from a noble tribe. And known for their bravery. And on that day, the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, after his companions went out into the battlefield, the first of the Banu Hashim was Ali al-Akbar. And imagine how tough it was, how hard it was for the heart of a father to send his son out into the battlefield. But he knew that it was inevitable. He knew it was something that would happen. So when he prepared him, he recited the verses, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَى آدَمَ وَنُوحَ وَآلَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَآلَ عِمْرَانَ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ ذُرِّيَّةٌ بَعْضُهَا مِنْ بَعْضٍ وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. He said, Oh Allah, bear witness upon these people. Allahumma ashhad alayhim فَإِنَّهُ قَدْ بَرَزَ إِلَيْهِمْ غُلَامٌ أَشْبَهُ النَّاسِ خَلْقًا وَخُلُقًا وَمَنْطِقًا بِرَسُولِكَ. Oh Allah, bear witness upon these people. Bear witness that the person who is going out into the battlefield, he is the most in his resemblance to Rasulullah in every way. Ali al-Akbar went out into the battlefield introducing himself. أنا علي بن الحسين بن علي نحن ورب البيت أولى بالنبي أضربكم بالسيف حتى ينثني ضرب غلام هاشمي علوي تالله لا يحكم فينا ابن الدعي. That I am Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali. and I will defend the household of my father. And by God, the one whose father is not known shall not rule above us," meaning Yazid. And he went out into the battlefield. Some narrations suggest that his mother Layla was inside of the tent, and she was looking outside to the face of Hussein alayhi salam to see his facial expressions. And all of a sudden, as Ali al-Akbar was out into the battlefield, his facial expressions, the facial expressions of the father, began to change. So she turned to him, she said, "Sayyidi Aba Abdullah, hal usiba waladi bishay?" Did something happen to my son that you are now frowning? He told her, "Nothing has happened to him, but a warrior has come out into the battlefield and I fear for his life," because this warrior was known for his bravery. He told her to stay in the tent and to pray for the return of her son. He said, "I heard Rasulullah say that when a mother does a dua for her son, it is accepted." So she went inside the tent, she turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she began with her dua, "Ya radda Yusuf ila Ya'qub." "O he who brought Yusuf back to the father Ya'qub, urdud alayya waladi, bring for me back my son." And within a few moments, Ali al-Akbar came back. But when he came back, he was tired. Physically, he was exhausted. He was thirsty. He turned to his father. He said, "Abatah al-atash qad qatalani wa thiqlu al-hadidi ajhadani." He says that the thirst is killing me, and the heaviness of the armor, it is weighing down on me. Is there anything for me to drink? Not even one sip of water. Imam Hussein alayhi salam assured him, he said, "My dear son, if there was anything, I am more thirsty than you." There was nothing that he can do to help him at this time. He said, "But go out into the battlefield. In a few moments you will be reunited with your grandfather. He will give you a drink of water from which you shall never experience any thirst again." So he went out into the battlefield on top of his horse, fighting valiantly, until finally one of the enemy soldiers threw a spear in his way and it landed in his chest. It struck him in his chest. The blood began to gush forth from his chest, covering the eyes of the horse. The narration says that the horse, instead of bringing him back to the camp of Imam Hussein, it went directly towards the camp of Umar ibn Sa'ad. And at that moment, the enemy army began to surround him. They began to rain down upon him with their swords and their daggers. Finally, Ali al-Akbar, he fell off of his horse. He fell onto the floor. He called out for his father. His father ran out to him. He found him in that state. During those last few moments, how is a father supposed to react with his son when he sees him in this state? He began to remove the dust and the dirt from his beard and his face. He placed his own cheek on his son's cheek. He said, "Bunayya Ali ala dunya ba'daka al-afa." My dear son Ali, this life is no longer worth living after you. Now that I have lost you, I have lost everything. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات إنك على كل شيء قدير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.